first Skyclan manga was a nice, simple, and relatively uncontroversial story about life in Skyclan as Leafstar prepares to balance motherhood with leadership. However, the second entry, Beyond the Code, will begin the main story that this trilogy is remembered for in the modern day, surrounding a certain former kitty pet that we learned was Soul in the last pages of that first book. Many things can be said about Soul's place in the series thus far, but one thing he never has been, and never will be, is nice, simple, or uncontroversial. So let's see how this book is impacted by his presence. Before we get into that though, this is the manga page I'll be redrawing today, chosen as usual by my patrons. Beyond the Code came out on November 22nd of 2011, about 4 months after The Rescue, the first entry in this manga trilogy, and the same day as The Forgotten Warrior. As usual, it was written by Dan Jolie and illustrated by James L. Barry, and it also included an anonymous Aaron Hunter note at the beginning, that I continue to suspect was written by Vicky. This one has the Aaron gushing over how cute it is to have Leafstar's kits bouncing around on the page, and even drawing a direct parallel to Bluefur's circumstances as opposed to Leafstar's. It's not easy, but she has a supportive circle of clanmates, and a mate, around her, and she is determined to get this right. She spends the last paragraph focused on Soul, telling us that we'll get to see his backstory along with his fierce desperation to become a warrior, and questioning whether that desire, on its own, is enough. Does every cat deserve to be a warrior? Guess we'll have to answer that as we go. Beyond the Code has a total speaking cast of 26 cats, just one more than the previous manga entry, and the top 5 members of that cast have 78% of the lines. Again, slightly more than in The Rescue, which makes sense given that we remain in the same setting and the cast is quite similar. What is noteworthy is that, after Leafstar, Soul is the second most prominent cat in the book, and is the only cat besides Leafstar with more than 50 lines. That is a substantial increase from his role in the first book, so whatever happens here, it is clear that Soul will have a very large part to play. We'll just have to see what that part is. We start out with a fearsome battle between Leafstar's 3 kits, while Leafstar herself watches fondly over them. Clovertail has been helping Leafstar adjust to motherhood, and Soul has been adjusting to warrior life, learning about hunting and patrolling, and being respectful to senior warriors. What a nice start. Honeypaw and Birdpaw are upset that Soul isn't doing any of the apprentice duties, and hasn't been given a warrior name, leaving him with a nebulous status in the clan that seems to get off with less work than them. But Leafstar points out that he is an adult, and he will get a warrior name soon. Keen-eyed viewers who remember anything about Soul in Power of Three or Omen of the Stars might remember that Soul does not have a warrior name, and given that this book claims to tell his backstory, it's unlikely that it happened after his appearances in those arcs. Anyway, it is also extremely hot, leaving prey scarce in the forest and hard to keep fresh in the camp. The Daylight Warriors, who get to go home to their 2 legs and guaranteed food at night, have been spending more time waiting in the shade rather than helping catch prey for their clanmates, which has reinvigorated the old Daylight versus Clanborn hostilities among the warriors. Leafstar tries to intervene, but at that moment, Harrykit gets his nose pricked on a sharp leaf, and Leafstar needs to take care of him too. Seeing the conflict, Billystorm dodges in to help the kits, while Leafstar talks down her clan. Though it is noteworthy that Billystorm himself was also avoiding hunting, which was the original instigator of this particular clan conflict. Leafstar suggests they switch to only dusk and dawn patrols to avoid the worst of the heat, and Sharpclaw joins in helping Leafstar's kits because Billystorm is, quote, in over his head. And then Leafstar has to step in anyway. Where is Clovertail, by the way? They established not 10 pages ago that she was helping Leafstar with her kits, especially since all of her own kits are in the apprentice or warrior's dens. Anyway, under this weight, Leafstar is forced to consider again if leaders should ever have kits. Soul does bring her some wool for Harrykit's nose, though, and shows appreciation for the immense amount of work she does for her kits and clan. Billystorm also apologizes for failing to fully calm down the kits without her intervention. Billystorm, Soul, and Sharpclaw each check in about their duties as Leafstar settles in with her kits, and Billystorm and Ebonyclaw in particular say they are going to stick around past when the other Daylight Warriors go back to hunt for their clan, without taking any prey themselves. Leafstar is also pleased with how well Soul is fitting in, but Echosong says she is worried. They don't know anything about him or his past, which you could also say for most of the original Skyclan cats. Leafstar points this out and tells Echosong to trust him as a clanmate. At night, Ebonyclaw's leg is hurt on a patrol at the same time that Leafstar's kits are trying to sleep, and squeal in her absence. So Honeypaw steps in to play with them while Leafstar checks in on Ebonyclaw and the other warriors hurt by a badger on their patrol. It seems that by hunting at dusk, they were intruding on the hunting times of other animals. Leafstar and Sharpclaw solved this by sending out 2 much larger hunting patrols rather than 4 small ones to ensure cats are protected as they hunt. Not unlike the way the tribe does it, actually. While they do that, Leafstar teaches her eager kittens a little bit about the hunting crouch. Unfortunately, while the 8 cat patrols did stay safe, they caught much less prey than they would if they were able to move and sneak around more easily. Patchfoot says that their patrol followed an idea of Soul's to split the patrol in half, and while cats are furious, Soul's half of the patrol shows up with a ton of prey, and everyone praises his skill as a hunter. This time, though, it is Sharpclaw who gets the sense that something's not right with him, considering that he'd never received any hunting training before joining Skyclan and hasn't demonstrated this much skill in the training sessions he's had. Leafstar decides to ask Soul herself what is going on, after easily asking Clovertail and Honeypaw to watch the kits for an evening. Leafstar asks to join Soul's hunting patrol as they do exactly what he did the previous night, and from the start, it is strange. He doesn't make any attempt to track down prey or search in the places it usually lives. Instead, he leads them to a fox den, where they steal the prey the fox has already caught as soon as the foxes aren't looking at it. Leafstar blows up at Soul, chiding him for leaving a trail that could put Skyclan in jeopardy from vengeful and now hungry foxes. She says this is not how a clan hunts. They use skill, and Soul says this was a skill. Leafstar tells him that stealing is not a skill, and he is not to do this ever again. They get back to camp, Leafstar explains to Sharpclaw what happened, and this time he blows up at Soul, who seems to not understand or care about their problems. Leafstar promises to keep this from the rest of the clan as long as Soul doesn't ever do something like this again. Soul spends the rest of the day laying in the shade and avoiding the clan, but he does join a training session when directly asked to join a couple of the mentors and apprentices in their battle training. Leafstar sits in on it and finds that Soul is doing significantly worse than the apprentices. Sharpclaw points out that he really doesn't have much skill, and Leafstar promises to get him training, maybe with Patchfoot, a great hunter. Sharpclaw agrees, but reiterates that he seems to have no natural skill at all. I'll come back to this later for the record. The foxes Soul stole from come to camp to attack, and Leafstar gets right in the middle of the action to fight and lead her clanmates, until her kits come out and ask to fight too. Leafstar asks Soul to tag in with the fox, but he seems frozen in shock, so Lycanfur ends up stepping in to get the kits back instead. They drive off the foxes, and Leafstar thanks Lycanfur profusely, right before telling her kits to not ever join a battle while they're this young. Soul apologizes too for becoming frozen at the critical moment. Leafstar asks if he really wants to be a clan cat. Hunting and fighting are at the core of this life, and he seems to neither enjoy nor have the natural skill in either. Soul insists that he has to be a warrior, as it has been his only dream for as long as he can remember. We then jump into Soul's backstory. His mother was named Cinders, and she didn't give any of her kids names. They lived outside, but Cinders didn't hunt for them much, and Soul questions if she ever really wanted kits. She did, however, tell them stories to get her kids to stay quiet. Stories of the ancient Sky Warriors, and emphasized that they weren't just fearsome, but kind to the weak as well. Cinders also seems to have a bad relationship with her mate, who never came to see them and didn't bring much when he did. Cinders would use stories of ancient Skyclan to contrast with their father and emphasize how bad a cat he was. Also, she got extremely angry if any of the kits ever ate two-leg food. Baby Soul promised his mom that he would be a warrior too, one day, and we can tell from her expression that she doesn't really believe him, or maybe care. After facing a myriad of hardships, Cinders gives up on the Sky Warrior story, saying that they aren't here now. No one is, and no one can help them. Soul's father shows up one day to say he found a new mate who doesn't complain, and they're moving away together to a place with more prey. He says bye and leaves, leaving Cinder to wail about being all alone with no one to help her, treated badly as always. Why does this always happen to her? Baby Soul tries to comfort her, saying he'll grow up into a big Sky Warrior and will protect her then, and Cinders yells at him that there are no Sky Warriors and to be quiet. A few days after, she leads them around and drops each of them off at a two-leg house to be kitty pets, as her kits squeal to not leave them behind. Soul watches for her every day, but she never came back. Now, despite the distinction between Cinder's legacy and reality, Soul is so overjoyed to be with these capable, kind warriors in Skyclan, and thinks his mother would be proud. Leafstar understands, and says she will do her best to help him develop the skills he needs to be a warrior. Leafstar also goes to Billystorm for an opinion on Soul, and, in addition to mentioning Soul's lack of intervention during the fox attack, he also says that Soul is generally lazy and clever, making any excuse to avoid doing something, and that Sharpclaw feels the same way. Leafstar decides to train Soul personally, and Billystorm wishes her luck, but points out that desire is only a piece of becoming a warrior. You also need to have skills and instincts. If you aren't born with those, you have to be willing to learn. Leafstar begins to train Soul, but he isn't catching on. She says that it's akin to training a stump. Soul makes an excuse for not fighting well because of a thorn he stepped on and asks to try something else, going on to say that it's not fair to expect him to do all the same things as a clan-born cat. Leafstar points out that most of Skyclan isn't clan-born and insists he keep trying. Soul continues to berate himself as he fails and does not take in Leafstar's instructions, but eventually he does show some improvement in his fighting abilities, and then stalking. After this, from what we can tell, one lesson, Leafstar is happy to see he is learning. Skyclan has their gathering, and it seems like rain is on the way, but Soul interrupts the festivities to announce that they have a new warrior with them and say he is ready to be a full Skyclan warrior. Leafstar explains that he would be assessed after he finishes his training, and Soul explodes, saying that she admitted he was learning and chiding her for humiliating him in front of his clanmates. Then he runs away and asks why stuff like this always happens to him, an almost perfect quote of what his mother said in his childhood. A storm then breaks out, and everyone must hide in their dens. Billystorm even decides to stay to look after the kits with Leafstar. The dens are beginning to flood, and Sharpclaw suggests evacuating before a torrent of water whips through the center of camp and everyone has to flee. Most cats are safe, but Echosong's herbs were all washed away, and Lycanfur was killed. Most of Skyclan's camp is destroyed, but Leafstar allows everyone to sit vigil for their fallen clanmate, and prays that Skyclan will be able to survive here. And that is the end of the book. Despite using a natural disaster as the final climax for the book, and having the hot weather as a presence throughout it, the main goings-on in Skyclan are pretty mundane here. Skyclan is not in more peril than it has ever been, or even in more peril than Leafstar has seen. It's just some of the casual issues with being in the wild and clan tensions over daylight warriors that Skyclan has seen plenty of before. No, the main conflicts in this book are exactly what the Erin mentioned in her opening author's note. The tensions between Leafstar, her duties to her clan and kin, and Soul. Let's begin with Leafstar's tension because it is a much easier one to understand and talk about. Leafstar is currently a mother. She enjoys and wants to act as a mother for her new kits. As support around her, she has Billystorm, at least during the day, Clovertail, apparently inconsistently, and many other clan cats who are happy to take over watching the kits for a bit, including Sharpclaw, Honeypaw, Lycanfur, and even Soul. While Leafstar wants to be a mom, she doesn't always have to be glued to her kids. Leafstar is also currently a leader. She enjoys and wants to act as a guiding and mediating force for her clan. As support around her, she has Sharpclaw, and most cats in the clan are capable of at least going about their normal daily duties without much intervention. But during an emergency or when big decisions need to be made, Leafstar tends to be the one who has to step in. This book constructed some coincidences where the kits and clan were in an emergency simultaneously, so Leafstar would feel pulled by her responsibilities, but in some cases, like the fox attack and flood, those two events were really the same emergency that just required separate interventions. With some contrivances aside, this is what I would consider a realistic depiction of someone who just has multiple responsibilities that they are committed to, and that take a lot of energy to maintain. However, Leafstar has a strong support system at this point, who understand exactly what she is going through, and they consistently step in to help her when they notice her duties conflicting. As a result, Leafstar's conflict doesn't actually feel like a conflict at all. She feels tension when she isn't sure how to help her kits or clan, but in having someone help out or giving her time to think things over, she has always been able to come to a solution and to cats who would help her emotionally regulate. Being, say, a new mother and a prominent figure in your career is a significant pairing of responsibilities, but it's not one that has to be resolved by letting one or the other go. The way this is usually treated as a conflict outside of warriors is just having the tension build up until you admit you need help, from your husband, friends, co-workers, or neighbors. But Leafstar has already done that, and each time we see her beginning to be overwhelmed, her attentive clanmates step in to notice and help her. I just genuinely like how this situation was portrayed. The one problem with this is that otherwise the book does not have an overarching conflict other than Soul. Let's talk about that guy. I have, many thoughts about him and the way he is portrayed in this book. Let's start off with the clan around him. With the exception of Leafstar, most of the time, I really do not care for how cats talk about Sol prior to his blow-up at the Gathering, particularly with Sharpclaw, Echosong, and Billystorm, who Leafstar goes to for guidance. I don't like the theme they all hammer in that Sol is less naturally skilled than other warriors, is suspicious before he does anything wrong, and isn't worth the training Leafstar wants to give him. As was pointed out even by the apprentices, Sol has received no formal training. He is effectively starting from scratch and learning the skills that a clan-born Kit or a brand new Daylight Warrior would. This is something that all of these cats should understand, considering they were there for the founding of Skyclan or the addition of the Daylight Warrior program. Yet, until Leafstar brings it up, and even after for some of them, they talk about Sol's progress as if it is a shocking disappointment that he hasn't been performing like the Skyclan warriors by just picking it up along the way? As a teacher, I'll admit that this attitude is both extremely familiar and highly frustrating. When Sol was taught skills starting at his level by an instructor, Leafstar, who could give him the time and specific instruction required for him to improve, he did start succeeding. Sure, he wasn't as skilled as a full warrior yet, but did anyone expect him to be? After one lesson? This was immense progress for him, and had that instruction continued, I have no doubt that his progress could increase until he did meet clan standards. I think this whole plot made me appreciate Leafstar significantly more, as, even among some of her most rational clanmates, she is apparently the only one willing to allow patience and compromises for cats at different skill levels. From a clan born of the idea that anyone with naturally strong legs was probably a Skyclan descendant, this ideology running rampant through the clan is realistic, but I'm glad Leafstar, most of the time anyway, is able to ignore the opinions of her mate, deputy, medicine cat, and clanmates to think and do what is actually right by Sol. I mentioned that Sol was at a Kit level in hunting and fighting proficiency, which was an obstacle to his becoming a warrior, but one thing that keeps coming up before, during, and after his training is an even greater obstacle: Sol's attitude. He is clever, but he uses his creativity to get out of work. He has a very low tolerance for struggle or the practice required to improve, and he is a bit cowardly, unable to think or intervene if he feels he is in real danger. According to Skyclan, including Leafstar sometimes, these are traits that make him unsuited to be a warrior. Here's the thing though, and again as a teacher, I recognize all of this. It is absurdly common in students who have had any circumstances earlier in their lives that prevented them from progressing as quickly as their classmates. If you are surrounded by people who can do all of the tasks being asked of them already, and you yourself are struggling, asking for help becomes a social threat. And instead, these students will often rely on the strengths they do have to avoid or get loopholes through assignments, as Sol does by using his intellect to take prey from the foxes rather than hunting himself. They also often develop a mentality to protect themselves, where anything they don't seem to be good at immediately is something that they didn't really want to do anyway. It's stupid, or unnecessary, or won't be used for anything in their future, so they don't need to do it. Hey, wow, isn't that exactly how Sol reacted when he was initially doing badly in Leafstar's training? When faced with something completely outside their comfort zone that they can't weasel out of with their own skills, they will often freeze and shut down, unable to do anything even when directly asked. Oh boy, you mean like how Sol froze in the middle of the fox attack and wasn't able to save Leafstar's kits? Every supposedly dooming behavior Sol shows here is one that is extremely recognizable as being from someone who feels insecure about their lack of talent, and has a particular perspective on that lack of talent. If you were in a school, or taught in a school in the last few years, you may have heard of, or been overrun with, talk about growth mindset. A perspective where people believe, as research shows, that we can expand our minds and actively grow our intelligence through hard work, when it is combined with effective instruction. A fixed mindset, the idea that intelligence is a thing that can be concretely measured and that you can only grow so much of if you don't start off with much potential, has been the standard for the last few centuries and is still a prominent concept for students and parents experiencing current education. If you have a growth mindset, you may approach an incorrect answer or failure to perform a task with a neutral or positive emotion, and see any feedback as directing you to where you can next grow. Meanwhile, someone with a fixed mindset would see a failure as evidence that they're a bad person, a bad student, or a bad warrior. They wouldn't like hearing or seeking out feedback because it just points out everything wrong with them and makes them feel awful. Well, as cheesy as it sounds, Sol is glaringly a cat who is stuck in a fixed mindset. He doesn't believe in the idea that struggle is productive, so he only thinks of himself in the binary of either a horrible warrior who needs to hide their lack of competence, or a fantastic warrior who was gifted all along and should be given their name now. This is the absolute textbook case of a student who would need the sort of intervention that Leafstar is providing, along with, frankly, a better social circle who won't consider him useless for being unable to perform duties that he has never been trained in before. The worst you could say about him is that, well, Sol is an adult, so while he doesn't yet have the skills that the other warriors do, and may well be deeply insecure about that, he should have better control over his emotions as he deals with that insecurity. And he should, but this book shows us exactly why he doesn't. I should start off by saying that I don't love Cinder's portrayal. Similar to Rainflower, we're not meant to sympathize with her at all, or even think about her own point of view. Her narrative role comes from the extremely negative effect that she has on her son. Cinder's continues a pattern with warriors where, when we need an awful parent, they keep being she-cats, and the worst Toms tend to do is be absent. Though, at least here, Sol doesn't think that his father was a fantastic guy. My point, though, is that as it applies to this overall pattern, I don't like Cinder's writing. However, I will say that it is perfectly constructed to give Sol the attitude and capabilities in the modern day that he does. Cinder's did not show affection to her kittens, to the point of not naming them or caring much when she eventually gave them away. She did not seem to be a talented hunter and made no attempt to teach her kits any of the skills she did have. The only thing that was imparted to Sol was Cinder's ideology, as expressed through her stories and exchanges with his father. Cinder's described the Sky Warriors as all being strong, beautiful, kind, and ferocious, as fast as cheetahs and capable of flight. In short, she thought of them as not just flawless, but mythical beings, with skills born into them by their nature that no cat could reach for. She has no patience for the idea that Sol could become a Sky Warrior, and doesn't suggest that any of the kits could grow to be more than they are, just that they could be taken care of by the Sky Warriors. This is reflected in Cinder's interactions with her mate, where she continuously berates him for not taking care of her and their family, rather than positioning herself as an equal to him. Cinders thinks of her mate as a necessary layer of protection for a cat who couldn't protect herself, and when he leaves, she scorns him for it harshly. But it also breaks her and leads to her giving away their kits. Basically, it is easy to see where Sol would have picked up his binary view and his defeatism and temper when he doesn't get his way. And it is this exact temperament and mindset that led him to, well, the final scene with Sol is uncomfortable for everyone involved, and I'll say ahead of time that it will have a lot of impact on the plot and character journeys in the third book of this trilogy. As I had already alluded to, Sol is someone who is extremely stuck in a fixed mindset. So while he spent a long time believing he could never learn warrior skills, when he finally does start to learn the basics with Leafstar, he instantly switches to believing that he's already a master and ready to be a warrior. When Leafstar tries to tell him that he is in the process of learning and will be assessed when he's done, Sol takes it as her having lied to him earlier about improving, because there are only two states for him, master or hopeless. He considers Leafstar's word to be a betrayal with the purpose of humiliating him, and runs away, never to be seen again in this book. I think this is a uniquely visceral dissection of what it can look like to try teaching someone who has spent their whole life in the most extreme fixed mindset you could possibly have. And honestly, I probably appreciate it, and would like it even more if this was dealt with well in the next book, if the cat going through it was a kid or even teenaged cat, and if this cat was not Sol. Sol himself already had a lot of mystique around him because of the portrayal he had in Power of Three and Omen of the Stars, and the question of what his backstory was and how he became the mysterious, clever, controlled, and cruel Tom he was is probably the main draw to reading this trilogy. But thus far, I have seen none of those characteristics, save for clever, and he has only ever been harshly reprimanded for his use of that skill. What we have seen is an incredibly immature, binary-minded, and hot-tempered Tom who idolizes the clans and has been doing his best to acclimate to them, despite his immense insecurity and extremely fixed mindset. It's hard to even see this cat as the same one we came to know, and what happens in the third and final entry may or may not do enough to connect the different souls we have come to know. Even so, in the same way that I was able to appreciate Blue Star's prophecy by distinguishing it from its connected material, in giving Beyond the Code a fair shake, I think it may be my favorite Skyclan book so far. It has a tight and mostly supportive cast, the best depiction of motherhood and leadership that the series will ever have, and a shockingly topical portrayal of a student stuck in a self-defeating mindset due to the way they were brought up. I suppose the only thing left to do is see how these threads all resolve in the last Skyclan manga. Before we get there, though, we will have to conclude Omen of the Stars with the first ever novella and the end of a full era of warriors, which we will explore in the next episodes of our trip through time.